Back again. Looking at today paper 2, which is the Worldview paper for our Humanities 115 course. I'm going to walk through our little agenda over here, what it is, what we're going to do, the parts for it, how to kind of lay things out, and then you can ask me questions via email. The main objective of the Worldview paper is to find out, for you to find out, how did you get to be the person you are? A lot of us go lots of years without anybody ever asking us that question or without really thinking about it very deeply. And so this is part of Socrates, right? The unexamined life is not worth living. So here's a part of making our lives worth living. The worldview, as you know from the book, is a philosophy of life. Okay, so how do you think about your life? How do you think about what life is worth doing? What is worth doing well? How much time, energy, passion, all of that goes into things. How do you get to be the person you are? And there are three main sections of figuring that out. One is your origins, okay? Where's your family? Where's your family from? How much impact do they have on you? Positive, negative, that kind of stuff. What is your heritage? This is culture. Some of us are um, plain old white bread, Midwestern, da da da. Okay. Others have more to that than just, you know, me, kind of normal, boring. You have a culture of heritage because your family has kept in touch with its roots, whether that's as an immigrant, as a Native American, as an African American, Hispanic, um, Irish, Celtic, whatever your background is, um, depending upon how much your family played that or was in touch with that, makes a difference in how you believe things, how you go about looking at things. And those are things to think about, okay? Um, where are you from place wise, okay? You know from day one, the first time you looked at the welcome video that, or heard the welcome video, that I'm not from Johnston County, I'm not from the South, I'm not from North Carolina, just by my voice, okay? My accent is different from most people I hang around with these days. Um, what does that mean? Okay. What does it mean that you were raised in, as lots of folks here were, raised in New York City or upstate New York or New Jersey or out in the middle of nowhere, North Carolina? What's the difference? What does that do for us or to us, depending? Your upbringing is the next section. Education, not just your formal schooling, although that does play a big part, but also your family education. How are lessons taught and learned in your family? What kinds of discipline get used? Also, if you practice a religion or a spiritual practice, what does that do for your outlook on life? Is it the same that you were brought up in? Have you changed your ideals since then? Are you in the midst of changing them? A lot of my students here at JCC are teenagers of various sorts, early 20s. There's a lot of change and shift in your ideas and ideals in that portion of your life. And there was for me. There was for most people you talk to, um, especially if you're here and you're a first generation college student. This is a big shift. What does that do? How does that change the way you look at life? Okay. What kinds of morals? How do you know what's right and what's wrong? Where did you learn that? What choices have you made along the way to shift that or not? Okay. And then lastly, your deeds, your own particular experiences, um, good, bad, indifferent, the choices you've made, the choices that have been made for you by parents and guardians and grandparents and all that other fun stuff. And where does your particular worldview and how you play that out differ from somebody else's? Okay. How does that differ from society at large? How does it differ from your best friend or your family or whatever? Somewhere in there, you've seen that, okay, this is my way of doing things. That's their way. I like my way better, or I like their way better. Maybe I'll shift some things. Okay, so that's kind of how those work. So how do we get there? Your first assignment for the Worldview paper is a questionnaire. Um, because, as I said before, lots of us go a long time without anybody asking us, how'd you get to be this person? Um, I have heard through most of my adult life, you are more normal than you have any right to be, given circumstances and otherwise growing up stuff. Okay, so how do I know that? Well, this questionnaire that I've developed is pretty straightforward. It asks you a list of questions, and you rate from 1 being not so much to 5 being absolutely yes. Um, and on the computer, the electronic versions, use the highlight pen. That's the easiest way to mark those up and then save it, pop it in um, on Blackboard. The questionnaire has 4 or 5 sets of questions, and then a space for some reflection. So maybe you had mostly 2s and 3s, kind of, and then there was this 5, or there was this 1. Why are those so different? Okay, that's a little bit of a reflection. Give you some ideas, some jumping off points for actually writing the paper. The rough draft is as much as you can get done by the due date. Okay, remember that the more you give me to look at, the better your feedback will be. The more complete the feedback will be. I'm always happy to look at another draft if you need me to. Send it to me via email. Um, but again, you're going to get feedback on your rough draft. Make sure you give yourself at least a few days in there to do that. And then the final draft is the polished and perfected. This particular paper does not need a works cited page or a references page unless you do quote from some sort of literature. You don't need to cite, well, you can say worldview is, give our standard definition, and then according to Lewis Vaughn and the Power of Critical Thinking, and be happy with that. If you have a sacred text that you want to quote, by all means, do the works cited thing. If you have inspirational literature, you have something else you want to quote, by all means, you can do that. I'm just saying most folks will not need a works cited page or a references page for this particular paper. It does need to be at least 3 pages. For most folks, that's not hard on this. You're talking about yourself, you're talking about your life. I know some of you who are more introverted may surprise yourself with how much you can write. And to that end, I want to make sure that you know I don't share these with anybody, not even my husband. I have had lots of his students in my classes, and if you don't share your life experience with him, I'm not going to go around you for that. Be aware, though, on the other hand, that there are certain things that are requirements for me to report. Things like child abuse, child neglect, um, threats to yourself or others, that kind of stuff. Although I will tell you, I understand a lot of that, especially the depression side of things. I have bipolar depression, and so I'm definitely on the yes, this exists, and yes, meds are a good thing for lots of people. So don't feel like you have to hold back on things that way. If it helps your story, if it helps you understand yourself better, by all means, write it down. Um, I will tell you, I have lots of folks who struggle because they're very private people and they don't really share very much. Okay, pick something for each of the sections that's a little less, in depth. That's okay. I want this to be useful for you as much as possible. So don't feel like you have to hold back, but don't feel like you have to spill. Okay, whatever works for you is good. I will tell you the longest one I've ever received was from a young man who's 19, 27 pages. Um, and you think 19, wow, okay. He grew up from the time he can remember in foster care, and nobody had ever asked him why he was a decent person. And so he wrote a lot. It was wonderful and heartbreaking and wonderful again. But keep in mind, this can get long, and that's okay. That's more than okay. So just keep that in mind as you go along. At least 3 pages. Make sure you do all the pieces that are on the assignment sheet, which is under our major assignments, paper 2. Okay. It'll also be in a copy in the week that I assign this. and so you'll have that particular paper as well. Print things out. I know y'all like electronic. Obviously, you're in an online class, but don't be afraid to print out a page so you have it and can look at it at 2 o'clock in the morning or whenever you're working on this. Okay. If you have questions, send me an email. Otherwise, have a good day.